so nice to
I
meet
know you, I don't know you, if you know what I mean.
you. Yeah, it's so nice to meet you.
And you as well. I'm just getting used to now meeting people on Zoom.
Yeah, it's much different than before.
Yeah,
I would prefer to meet normal in normal way kind of, but
absolutely.
oh well. So at the beginning, could you say a few words about your like profession and what were you doing during your life and nowadays?
Have you got a few days?
In a short description, maybe.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it brief, although I'm known for my long words or long sentences. Um, no, I started life in the fashion industry very humbly,
Mhm.
working in a factory. In fact, sweeping up in the factory in the cutting room and
Okay.
going to get the tea tray for the cutters, and
Mhm.
that's part of my job and my um, start in the industry. And so you learn very quickly that you have to be humble.
Mhm.
Can't be too big-headed about things. But gradually, in that role, I was then put onto the cutting tables. I was allowed to use a pair of shears.
Wow.
Many times when I was using shears, and I still do it to my students if I have any, you know, and I'm seeing them cut. If
Mhm.
I have my thumb up, the man who's working with me would get the ruler and smack me across the thumb. Your thumb should be down when you're using your shears, you know.
Uh-huh.
You learn very quickly. And in those days, we started cutting canvases and linings, and then you went on to trimmings, and then you're a big deal when you could do cloth cutting. You did main cloth garment cutting.
Mhm.
And from then graduating from shears to use what is known as an Eastman machine. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're a reciprocating blade in
Mhm.
a knife that you push through plies of fabric.
Okay.
So you would make a marker, and then you would lay up the plies of fabric, maybe 40 thick sometimes, and you'd cut 40 garments at once with
Mhm.
this. So you have a round knife that you can cut small layers, but this reciprocating blade knife, an Eastman cutter, can do many, many thicknesses. So
Mhm.
I then that was called a stock cutter.
Okay.
And when you're then a stock cutter, at that time, if you look on my CV, let's go back to it. That was Sears and Sons from 1960 when I started work, and I was there 3 years
Mhm.
basically. So because I was working at Sears, and this chap said to me, "You should go to get some education." I went to London College of Fashion, where I
Mhm.
started studying garment making, and
Okay.
they called it ladies tailoring wholesale at that time.
Okay.
And also that also led on to the full technology course that I did, where you did part one and part two. And
Mhm.
that's like the equivalent, they said at the time it's an equivalent to a degree, but it wasn't
Mhm.
really. I mean, it was very good, but it wasn't. But because I'd been to this college and because I was learning formally, I came into work and watched how they made the sizing, and I didn't agree with it. And so I said to the manager very cheekily, "If you give me a rise in pay, I'll show you how to grade your sizes properly." He looked at me,
That's not very humble.
not very humble at all at that point, no. So anyway, but I'm just saying the cheek of it. Sometimes he
Yeah.
gave me a rise. I graded the patterns for him differently, where I graded the neck and the shoulder, where they were just putting ½ inch on the side seam. They were just, really doing it very crudely.
Mhm.
And he gave me the rise, and I got the move up in job, and I could do some patterns now. So I sort of had a little feel and a little touch of patterns while I was at Sears. I then went to, if you look on my CV again, 1963 Steinberg and Sons.
Mhm.
And they were a company which was a wholesale coat and clothing, dress, skirts, trouser maker. And they were, I don't know who they supplied in terms of retail, but they were a huge label at that
Mhm.
time. And that, I know, yeah. So they had a label called Mary Quant,
Okay.
Mary
Yeah.
Ginger Group, They were the people that made wholesale for Mary Quant. In fact, I worked on some first stuff while I was there. And I went to this job and I told them that I was a pattern grader. I worked at.
You were?
I had graded. I wasn't telling lies. I had graded patterns, but I wasn't a pattern grader. I was a cutter. And I remember going in and having this interview, and then he said to me, "We'll come for a day and we'll put you on the boards." And they gave me a pattern to grade, and I graded it. But I said to them, "Look, everybody grades differently, so please tell me how you want me to grade." And really showed me how to grade. But I said, because every place you go to does it differently, and I want to do it the right way. So, and then I'm working away there, and somebody called out, "John," and I looked over, and it's my cousin. I really didn't know she worked there. And she said, "What are you doing here?" So I said, "I've come for a job." So she said, "Oh goodness," Anyway, I eventually got the job and worked there for another 3 years. I seem to move every 3 or 4 years. And so working in that was very good. And what I would say is I never ever was stopping. I was always looking to do things. And whereas you had in the trade at that time, you had a busy time and a slow time. And it sounds crazy, but in the slow time, the guys would make model cars, they would do aeroplanes, they would do the wife's coat, they would do massive things that they did that were nothing to do with the job. And I used to say, right, if I've got nothing to do, I'll go to the pattern cutter and can I help you? Can I cut out for you? Can I mark out your patterns? Can I, can I make your toile for you? That's what I learned, how to make a toile there. To cut someone's pattern, make it up into a toile, fit it onto a stand, ready to crit it and make it perfect. So it was a very good time for me at that time in learning. So in '66, I moved to a company called Gilchrist and Sons. Now, that to me was a big deal because they were in the West End, in the West End of London, just behind Oxford Circus. And I thought, I've made it, I've really found my niche, and this is incredible. Again, I went to them and said I was an assistant cutter. I had done assistant pattern cutting, but I wasn't an assistant pattern cutter, but I had done it because I'd worked in STEINBERG's helping the pattern cutters. So I got the job in Gilchrist, and again, you often did a day's work there. Got on very well with the guy. And Malcolm Levine, I can remember him very clearly. And he taught me a tremendous amount in pattern cutting because he had a certain system of, it was like geometry. He would slash and cut and open up patterns in a way that I'd never experienced before, and that I'd never experienced in the college. The college taught me to draft, to drape, and Malcolm taught me to cut patterns using geometry in a way. So it was real, and it wasn't measurement geometry. It's all about, let's say, cutting and slashing and opening up. And we would make coats there. We were a coat maker. And so again, I was employed to cut his lining patterns and his canvas patterns and all the trimming patterns that you had for a coat. And I sort of enjoyed it in some ways. And I met some wonderful people there, some old Jewish tailors that, used to work away, and they were cutting and sewing and they're talking all the time like this, and they're lovely old boys, really good. I make my kids laugh now where I imitate. Mr. Kirschberg used to say, "Doctors, what do doctors know? They only know what somebody else told them." There was wonderful colloquialisms that he used to, and he was an expert on everything, this Mr. Kirschberg. And I remember Malcolm saying to me, "Aren't we lucky to have worked with Mr. Kirschberg, who knows so much about every subject?" Anyway, so I worked for Gilchrist for again 3 years. So in 1970, I looked to go elsewhere, and I moved back again to the East End of London. I saw this job advertised in a coat company. Wanted a pattern cutter, designer pattern cutter, because I was then a designer. I elevated myself to being not just a pattern cutter, but a designer. And I went to work for this company at Nat Shine, which was an old family business And I worked for the young grandson, Roger Shine, who was one of the most awful people that I've ever worked for.
Oh my.
What he taught me was so much about how not to treat people rather than how to treat people.
That's very important.
Absolutely. And again, he taught me how front can get you through so many situations. I remember I'd never been on a business trip, and I went to Stockholm with him to, it was H&M used to be, forgive me, I can't remember, H&M used to be Hennes and something else. Hennes and something, that's what H&M stands for. And Hennes we went to see to sell on some children's wear. And I remember we packed our case with all these children's wear garments, and he said to me, whatever you do, just follow my lead, right? If anything happens, you just follow my lead. I said, yeah, fine. Why, Roger? Because we haven't got a carnet for these garments. What do you mean? He said, well, we're smuggling these garments in, basically. So I said, now you tell me this. We're in the car going to the airport. Now you tell me. Don't worry. He said, just follow my lead. So imagine I'm really nervous because we're going to Sweden for the first time. Never been before. Staying in Stockholm, never stayed in a business hotel before, and we get on the plane, everything's fine. We get out the other end, and they unload our stuff. And as they throw our stuff out on a case, the case bursts, and out pops all these garments. Oh wow! And Roger goes mad. He acts like a lunatic. And I'm thinking, God, please, Roger, don't. Well, how do you do this to me? You've broken my garment. You've broken my case. All my clothing's come out. And really made a big. I know, I'm terribly sorry, sir. Oh, forgive me. Anyway, they put it all back in and got it right. And we travelled off to the client. With my heart going like this because I'm going to be arrested for smuggling. But anyway. We managed to see Hennes, and we had a very successful trip. So I went to Maxwell Croft. The Maxwell Croft was this high-end Bond Street couture, made to measure, and they did some stock work as well, but mainly made to measure fur coats. And I went in to see Maxwell, and he interviewed me there, and we sat and chatted. And he was frightfully nice, had a wonderful voice. He used to talk like that all the time, but it was wonderful. And I learned from him so much about the front shop. I'd always been a backroom boy. I'd always done, working in the workroom. Yeah. I didn't have any spiel, any chat, any line. I needed to develop myself, and that was one of the places I developed this chat and this being able to relate to people. And so Maxwell said to me, can you cut couture? So I said, yeah, of course I can. Well, have you done any before? I said, yes, I've cut for garments for people. I've made my wife dresses. I've made, other clients' dresses. And I wasn't lying. I had done private things. So he said, okay, measure up Pam, my secretary there, and I'll give you a coat, and you can make it to fit her. So I said, okay. So I measured this lady as best as I could, sleeve length, bust, waist, hip, and went away with the pattern, with a copy of his pattern, fur coat pattern, cut a pattern, made a toile, came back and fitted it on Pam, and thank God the thing fitted with a little bit of pin in here and there. And he went, okay, John, you got the job, frightfully nice, you got the job. By the way, you have to wear a white coat in the shop. I said, okay. So whenever you went into the sales room, as a medical person, you had to wear this white coat, and I hated it. I really did, this white coat, but I wore it out of protest at the time. So I started to get into measure cutting, and as I entered into the workroom, the old boy Len Evans, his name was about to retire, and Mr. Evans was the cutter there, and he had a bevy of girls who did his toiles and his linings, and then there were downstairs, there were what they call fur cutters that did they cut the fur. They often cut the fur at angles to make the minks longer. Okay. And the mink coat, you know, mink's quite narrow when you look at a mink coat, but actually in real respect it's quite wide. So they cut it at an angle. They call it dropping when they do that. They cut it at an angle and the whole thing drops down, becomes narrow. So the old boys downstairs did all the nailing out of the fur to the patterns that I would cut. And they looked at me, and I was in my 30s then. I'm just a kid, you know. These blokes are in their 60s and 70s, and I'm just a little boy. So again, I go back to being an infant. But I did it, you know, I did it. And I learned so much off these lads. I mean, they were lovely, they really were. And Mr. Evans showed me a method of measuring that, oh my God, it was so complex, but it looked good in the shop front, and it did give you all the measurements in a certain order, that you always took them in that order. But you developed a relationship with your salesman. And funny enough, when I was thinking about this interview, I thought back to Mr. Connolly and I being in the sales room, and we used to talk in abbreviations. I'd say, you know, I'd measure across the shoulders, go, yes, DR, that's drop right.
Okay.
Put that down. And then I'd say FB, and that was fat bum. Yeah, we said all these, and we would try and make one another laugh all the time with all these sort of silly, all these silly abbreviations that we used in the industry. And nobody ever asked me about what these abbreviations were. Some of them were absolute rubbish, but you said it, and a lot of it was right. You know, I do NL, NW, neck to base, FL, full length, and say it, and you know, and so you go through it. And this was a way we took the orders, a way we took the measurements. But the thing I learned there was the biggest thing that you could learn is to stand back and look at their posture. Look at the way they stood. If they were full busted, they were often very small across the back. I learned so much about people. If they were very rich people, they were often highly strung, and you'd get hold of them and their shoulders would be up here. And I would put my hands on their shoulders and say, look, just stand and relax for a minute, just a moment. And they'd sort of relax the shoulders down. And then I'd measure them to get the proper fit. Because otherwise, if they didn't relax, you couldn't get a decent measurement. So I learned a lot about people and going and meeting people. Like there was a Mr. Taylor who used to take us to the top floor of one of the large hotels in Hyde Park, the Dorchester, top floor of Dorchester. This family, Arab family, rented the whole top floor of the Dorchester. And so when we went there, Mr. Taylor said, look, follow my lead. You must be social with them. They're going to offer you a drink. They're going to offer you chocolates. They're going to do that. But you mustn't touch mama. So I said, what do you mean? You mustn't touch mama at all. So I said, but I'm going to measure mama. So I said, yes, but you mustn't touch mama. So I had to measure this lady. And I can remember she was a huge lady, this mama. And I had the tape measure around her, and I'm going, oh, 400, you know. I got to a point where I sort of made up a measurement in between to get to the measure. Yeah. And you did. It's exactly what you said. We went there and we had to drink a glass of whiskey. We had to have some chocolate with them. He smoked. He had a cigarette with the guy. And there was a whole negotiation going on. And he said to me, look, before we get in there, I'm going to tell you, do not say anything about price or anything. So what do you mean? So when he got in there, the price he quoted, and we were making a mink coat then for round about 15,000, something like that. That was 15,000 was quite cheap, you know. And he went in there and he said 30,000, and I sort of looked at him when he said 30,000. And of course, then the Arabs liked the bargain, so he then bargained with them till he got them back down to 16,000, just above what he normally charged for it. So again, I learned an awful lot about negotiation and about people, what they like, what you're giving them. Is an experience as well as a product. Yeah, that was very much so in that part of the industry. And I saw an advert for Marks and Spencer, Now, I had been to a job interview for Marks and Spencer just before I joined CROFT. And I got into this interview at Marks and Spencer, and we were in there about half an hour. And then somebody said in this interview, so Miss London, how many menswear people have you worked for? So I looked across and sort of did a double take. I said, no, I'm a ladies' wear cutter. And I could see from the look of consternation on the person who was interviewing me, who looked again and looked around. Oh, okay, we'll phone you. We'll be in touch. And I knew I wasn't going to get it. That was 2 years before. So this time I saw the advert again. I thought, I'll go along. I'll just, you know, it'll be something to do. I'm really like so casual about it. And I went in for the interview, and the HR people interview, first of all, they sort of take you through the first preliminary thing. And then they say, right, hang on there. We're going to get somebody from the department who can come down and talk to you. And so I sat there quietly, and the door opened, and in walks a guy that I worked with back in 66, STEINBERGs. He was one of the pattern cutters that I'd helped doing jobs for in 1966. And he was one of the head of the technical team for ladies' outerwear in Marks and Spencer. And he went, hello, John. I was, hello, David. And how are you? Oh, I'm fantastic. So when are you coming to join us? This was him. He came in to interview me. When you come to join us? I think, well, I've got the job, haven't I? So I joined them, and when I first joined them, David was on holiday, and so I turned up on the morning for my, you know, induction, as it were. And M&S, I've got to say, were incredible. They were my university of my life, because I saw their overseas production, I saw cloth mills, I saw trimming makers, everything that you needed to know about in the industry. That your suppliers were the strongest thing that you could have in the department. If you messed up your suppliers, you're finished. So you need them like they need you. You need them even more to be good. And so I treated them, I think, with respect. And because of that, when I was again, like second time in my life, made redundant from Marks and Spencer's, that was when I started the London Consultancy.
Okay, yeah.
And out of that adversity, you might say, comes success in terms of my own satisfaction. And
this is your own company?
This was my own, first time I started my own company called the London Consultancy.
Yeah.
And I did all manner of things. If you look on the CV,
yeah, I saw a lot of companies that you worked with.
All the names and different companies.
Yeah, it's like, for example, Arcadia Group. It's like Arcadia Group. It's like Topshop, right? For example.
Arcadia, the Arcadia Group. Yeah, that was Topshop. In fact, I worked for Top Women there. Again, that was on a maternity leave thing. Somebody was off for a time, and I spent time in their buying offices doing fittings. It was a madhouse, absolute madhouse. Yeah. And they had, whereas M&S used to structure your fittings, a whole line of people waiting for you, queuing up to see you. So you never had time to write the notes on what you were doing. So you crit the garments, saw them very quickly, sent them on their way. It was an absolute madhouse, but a great experience to work for that sort of company.
When you have your company like this London Consultancy, what do you do there? Like, you are going to another company and like help them with, yeah?
Yeah, well, I helped in terms of all technical experience that they needed. So whether it was pattern cutting, whether it was sizing, whether it was the making of the garments.
Okay. Going back to the university years, because that's mainly my public, I would say. So what would you say is like the most important while studying?
Well, I read something recently, and it was from a guy called Tim Ferriss. If you've ever read Tim Ferriss or and he said, and I agree with it, one of the biggest things you can do is public speaking.
Oh yeah.
How to speak confidently,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because I didn't learn that until I got to Marks and Spencer.
Okay.
And I was often the person who would come out too quickly with an answer or with a solution. And if you time yourself right in public speaking, that's the secret to a good being listened to in a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Your ideas being accepted.
Yeah.
And I learned that in Marks and Spencer's, all the different courses they send us on, you have to be a salesman. You have to sell your ideas to people.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't sell your ideas are not going to get across, however good they are.
Yeah.
You've got to sound convincing, and you've got to be able to put it across.
Mm-hmm.
Writing skills, he says, and I agree.
Okay.
You've got to know how to write a good brief on something. You've got to know how to write a good report on something. And that was some of the things that I did as a London consultancy, was those jobs where I had to write a report on a particular company, or go in and tell them how they're going to improve their production. But it had to be done in written skills. And then negotiating skills.
Oh, yeah.
Tremendously important. So they're the three things that I would say as a university student.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can tack into that, technology, you've got to embrace technology.
Mm-hmm.
You've done it beautifully. You know, you picked up this, and I really admire what you're doing.
Thank you.
I'm not to flatter you, but what you're doing is so great, because you're giving other people a chance to have a peek into other people's lives, and what they found and what they did in their work.
Because like I started with, not everyone knows like who our teachers are, for example, and what is their experience. And I started researching my own professors, for example, and then I was like, wow, they are doing an amazing job. So probably we don't have to like focus only for like, I don't know, like huge designers like, I don't know, Marc Jacobs, for example, but there's also so many people with great experience such as yours that like for example my friends wouldn't know about. So that's why I wanted like to kind of tackle this.
I think, honestly, I'm not just saying this to flatter you, but I think you're doing a great job, and I think it's a job that they should have should be part of your thesis when you're learning in college, to learn about other people and how.
Okay. What would you say that we should consider while applying for the first job then in the fashion industry?
Well, when you're going for your first job, I think you've got to be a general specialist. I know that's mad.
To know everything, basically.
Well, don't try and spread yourself too widely. Because you're not going to know everything as a young person. Be a specialist in something. Have a real core to what you know, and make that very special. But also be aware of all the other things there are around. So I'm sort of saying you must have knowledge, you must have technology, you must have understanding of the clothing that you're trying to make. You must know how it goes together. You must know how the pattern's cut. You must know something about sizing. You must know something about making up, about the trimmings that go into it. You must know all those things, because that's the core of what you're doing. But at the same time, also be wide enough to look at the big field that you're going into. Try and find out, if you're going for a job, find out about that company. Get as much information as you can, research on them, the people who run it, the sort of history of the company. All those sort of things help you prepare for when you go to that interview. And when you arrive, I said to students, do a dummy run, go another day on the same route that you're going to go to when you go to that job. Why? Because you can go there, you can have a cup of coffee, and you might even see people from the building that are working in there, and you're going to hear things that are said while you're having that cup of coffee, and that's mad. But you will get a feel for the sort of people in that building, what it's even if you just sit and have a cup of coffee nearby.
Yes.
Do you get what I mean? It's do research
Yeah.
where you can. And every year I do an interview technique morning with the students where I take them through what it's like to go for an interview, and I talk to them about how to present yourself and be on time, be dressed right, be smart, you know, research where you're going, understand.
Exactly. That's the most important.
Have questions ready to ask that company about themselves because they want questions from you. All these things, shaking hands, teaching them how to shake hands, believe it or not. Eye contact when you're talking, making sure that you're getting to that person in the right way. And they love it. And I go in, I don't charge them for it. And I know this girl who...
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And she said, every time you come in, John, and then these kids go away to get their jobs, you know, in helping or in doing the first touch in going into the industry, get their jobs each time. You know, they always seem to be so successful after some of the work you've done with them. So I get flattered by that, and I quite...
What would you say that, like, I think this is a very current topic, how the fashion will look like after coronavirus, basically?
I think the virus is going to do a great deal of good for all of us. As much as it seems at the moment limiting for people, I think it's pushed technology on 20 years, 25 years, because things like this, talking, interviewing,
exactly,
that people would never do before can be done so easily now. So the need for you to travel and spend your energy and your time and the money to do some of the interviews that you do or the meetings that you make will be much better done online. I think we are going to see a greater amount of retail online buying. A tremendous amount, because we all are going to be restricted in what we can do in shops. Gradually, I think that will be relaxed, as I'm sure they will find a vaccine. I'm convinced that we have the technology and the clever people, certainly in Britain, if not in the world, to be able to overcome this thing. And eventually things will get back to a new normal. But I was reading, and again, have you read this book at all?
No, I didn't.
Right, put it on your book list, because it's a fantastic book, and it's about AI and about the way that industry will change and the way retail will change because of what's happening to us now. Yeah. And he wrote an article for the Times recently, the Financial Times. It picked up as a very good article. It was quoted in today's Times, I think. But I don't read the Financial Times, but I do get the Times. Yeah. And he's somebody you should read if you haven't read stuff. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I will read it then. And to, I would say, finish our conversation, can you say like 2 or 3 advices for students?
Yes. First, read Tim Ferriss.
Okay.
That's what you've got to do. And his thing about skills, relationships, transferring skills, embracing technology, all those things are massively important, I think. And he said, be a general specialist.
Okay.
Can I finish with a little reading to you?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
This is from a book called The Prophet.
Okay.
Come across this, have you?
I think I heard about that, but I didn't read it.
Get a copy of it. This is a tatty old copy, falling apart. And this is: the teacher who walks in the shadow of the temple among his followers gives not of his wisdom, but rather of his faith and his lovingness. And if he indeed is wise, he does not bid you to enter to the house of wisdom, but rather leads you to the threshold of your own mind.
Mm-hmm.
Take that away with you.
Very good. Okay, so thank you so much. Then it was a great conversation with you. I really had so much fun.
I really enjoyed talking to you.
Okay, thank you so much then.
Speak to you.
Nice to meet you too.
We'll meet sometime when we can.
Of course, yes, of course. Okay, bye-bye.